Why did a decorated SEAL commander drive across 3 states just to watch a girl shoot? It didn't make sense. Not to anyone who knew Jack Raines, not to his former unit, not to the Pentagon liaison who saw his name on the travel manifest, not even to the range owner, a grizzled Marine vet named Roy, who hadn't seen that many stripes in one man since Iraq. But there he was, SUV coated in dust, boots crunching gravel, and dark sunglasses hiding the thoughts of a man who'd buried more than he'd ever said aloud. He didn't talk much, never had, especially not about ghosts. And yet, he was here because of a whisper, a single sentence from a retired sniper he owed his life to. You should check out this girl in Nevada. Doesn't talk, just shoots like she's possessed. Raines hadn't believed it at first. Hype had no place in war. But something about the way his buddy said it stuck. So here he was, standing still, arms folded, as a young woman knelt in the dirt and lined up her rifle on lane 7 like the world didn't exist. She didn't notice him, didn't even blink. Her name was Emily Carter, civilian. Early 30s, slim build, quiet eyes. Worked nights at a no-name diner off Highway 95. Came to shoot every morning before the desert heat settled in. Brought her own rifle, wrapped in canvas like it was sacred. Parked in the same spot, used the same lane, said nothing. To Roy, she was quiet Emily. To the locals, just another loner. With calloused hands and a story no one asked for. But to Raines, standing there behind mirrored lenses, she was something else. He watched her. Everything was deliberate. Posture, breathing, trigger pull. The scope adjustments were minute, barely visible. Yet he saw it all. The way she counted the wind by reading a single twitch in a distant weed. The way her finger settled on the trigger as if it were part of her pulse. She fired once. Metal rang in the distance. Then again and again. 5 perfect shots. No rush, no hesitation. The kind of rhythm only years of muscle memory could create. The kind Raines used to teach. The kind you didn't forget. Emily didn't acknowledge the attention. She was in the zone, locked in. Dust clung to her boots, sweat beaded in her temples. The sun had just begun to rise behind the ridge, and her shadow stretched long across the cracked earth. Raines took a slow step forward. She sensed it, didn't flinch, but turned, eyes narrowing slightly, hands shifting around the stock, defensive, not scared. He stopped 10 feet away. Mind if I watch? He asked, voice calm, grounded, but unmistakably commanding. Her gaze lingered on him a beat too long. Most men got awkward under that stare. Raines didn't. Free country, she said finally. He nodded once and moved closer. His boots stopped just short of her mat, close enough to see the rifle up close. It was old, customized, hand-assembled. Not a single untouched factory part on it. She'd modified the cheek rest herself. He could tell by the stitching. The scope's mill dots were worn, the barrel hand-reblued. This wasn't a rich hobbyist toy. It was an extension of her soul. You military? He asked. No, she said without missing a beat. But her voice carried weight, not denial, just finality. Raines didn't believe her. Not fully. Where'd you learn to shoot like that? She looked away, adjusted her sights. My dad. Was he military? Marine sniper, Afghanistan. Taught me everything. The words weren't warm, just factual. Like a stone she carried in her pocket but didn't show anyone. Raines watched her reset. She exhaled slowly. Fired again. Bullseye. He didn't speak. Not for a while then. He taught you well. She gave the smallest nod, almost invisible. He stayed until she packed up. She slung her rifle over her shoulder, dusted off her jeans, and walked past him like he was any other man. That's when he handed her the card, plain white. Just a set of GPS coordinates printed in faint gray font. No name, no logo, just a place. Come shoot there sometime, he said, then turned and walked away. Emily stood there for a moment, watched the SUV roll back over the gravel. She didn't say a word, but something inside her shifted. Later that night, she sat alone in the diner, staring at the card. The fluorescent lights above her buzzed. Coffee pots steamed. A trucker in the corner picked at pancakes, oblivious to the moment. Happening just feet away, Emily flipped the card over, blank. She'd seen cryptic things in her life, heard stories through her father, read classified headlines that never made the news. But this wasn't a recruitment. It was a key, a door, and she could feel it opening already. She slipped the card into her wallet without a word, poured more coffee for the trucker, washed dishes until 2 a.m. The next morning, she was back at lane 7. And so was he. Same SUV, same silence, same posture, arms folded, sunglasses hiding a calculating gaze. But this time, the other shooters noticed. They whispered, stared. Emily ignored them. She laid down, scanned the horizon. Today's wind was trickier, swirling, unpredictable. She read it like a book, waited, timed the gusts, found the rhythm. 5 shots. Quick. Controlled, perfect. Rain stepped forward again. Still just practice, he asked. She shrugged, eyes still downrange. Nothing else to do. You ever think about competing? He said, nope. What about teaching? That made her look at him. Teaching who? He crouched beside her again, picked up a spent shell, rolled it between his fingers like it held answers. You know what separates good shooters from ghosts. Emily didn't reply. They adapt faster than they think. They don't rely on training. They become it. She studied him now, more closely. He wasn't trying to impress her. Wasn't trying to intimidate her. He was measuring something. Not her skill. Her choice. There's a facility, he said, voice lower now. Not official, off the books, where we take people who don't fit the mold, but can do things. That matter, I want you there. She frowned. Why me? Because I've trained SEALs. Delta, Recon. None of them shoot like you do. She stayed quiet. What would I be doing? That's up to you. It's not enlistment. It's a test. You come. You train. You walk if you want. But if you stay. He paused. You'll see who you really are. Emily didn't answer. She stood, packed her rifle. Dust kicked up around her boots. She walked away. But the card stayed in her back pocket. That night, she drove out beyond the last service road. Deeper into the desert than ever before. No lights, just stars, endless and cold and honest. She laid her rifle on the hood of her truck. Stared up at the sky. Her father once told her, one day, someone's going to see you and realize what I've always known. You're not normal, Em. You're meant for more. She loaded a single round, aimed at a tin can on a boulder 1,200 yards. Away. Deep breath in, slow exhale. The shot cracked like a whip. A moment later, the can exploded. She stayed there, still looking through the scope. The night didn't answer her. It didn't need to. By sunrise, her decision was made. At 6:47 a.m., Rains returned. What kind of place didn't have a name, a rank, or even a welcome? Virginia was colder than she expected. Emily Carter drove through the hills just past dawn, her pickup rattling over gravel as the GPS ticked down to 0. The roads narrowed into trees. Pines closed in around her. Tall and silent, she passed no signs, no fences. Nothing that told her she'd arrived, until a single checkpoint appeared like a mirage. 2 men stepped out of a shack. No insignias, no words. One scanned her ID. The other looked through the windshield like he could read her history just by breathing her air. Then a nod. The gate rolled open. She drove through. No music, no reception, no instructions, just forest and steel. The facility sat buried into the side of a hill. Gray concrete, barbed fencing, no flags, no guard standing post. Just cameras tucked into tree branches and biometric locks on every door. It wasn't military, not in the traditional sense. It felt older than that, like something that predated. Uniforms. She was assigned a room, windowless, plain bed, desk. Nothing else except a single typed note taped to the wall. Assessment begins at 0500. Show up sharp, or don't show up at all. She didn't sleep that night. Not out of fear, out of readiness, she cleaned her rifle, checked her optics, rechecked her zero. Then she sat cross-legged on the floor, staring at the wall, her father's. Words echoed again. You only miss when you stop respecting the shot. By 0447. She was already walking to the range. 12 others stood in line, most of them taller, louder, more muscular. 11 men. 1 woman. Several with unit patches from elite divisions. Green Berets, Force Recon PJs. Their rifles looked like museum pieces, shiny, expensive, untested. One guy had a watch worth more than her truck. She didn't make eye contact, just found her spot, laid out her mat, assembled her rifle piece by piece like it was a ritual. The instructor stepped forward. No names, no greetings. Rules. 1 BART. Multiple targets, ranges 400 to 1,500. Wind changes every 60 seconds. Live competition. Top performance sets the tone. Some of the men glanced at her. A few smirked. She didn't smirk back. First round. Target. 700 yards. Emily was second fastest to fire. Second round, 900 yards. She was fastest and most accurate. By the third shot, murmurs started. By the sixth, they weren't murmuring anymore. At 1,200 yards, a sudden wind shift threw most shooters off. Emily read it instantly, adjusted mid-breath. Clean center hit. Someone muttered, "Who the hell is she?" No one answered, but Rains, standing behind the line with arms crossed, didn't even blink. He just watched. Then came the final test. 1,530 yards. Over a rise, swirling crosswind, 6 seconds to identify the target. Calculate elevation and drift, and fire. Most hesitated. Emily dropped flat, breathed in slow. Eyes scanned terrain. Saw the way dust kicked sideways off the grass. Tiny signs, subtle movement, 5 seconds, 4-3. Trigger pull silence, then ping, dead center. No applause, no commentary, just quiet. One instructor rechecked the digital records twice. Later that day, the candidates gathered for chow. Emily sat alone, as always, spooning lukewarm stew. The others clustered in small circles, quiet now, tired. Most avoided her, except for one. A large man, squared jaw, short buzz cut, old Marine tattoo on his forearm, walked over with a tray and a nod. He sat across from her. You shoot like my nightmares, he said. Emily glanced up. You get nightmares often, he grinned, setting down his spoon. Only when they bring in ghosts. She didn't smile, but something in her eyes warmed. I'm Mackie, he said. Scout sniper, Iraq, then Syria. Emily, she replied. He tilted his head. No cow sign. She shook her head. Not yet. He nodded slowly, chewing. Then, where'd you learn to read wind like that? She looked down at her hands. Montana, middle of nowhere. My dad used to make me spot game without scopes. Said if you couldn't feel the weather in your skin, you'd never survive a second shot. Mackie leaned back, impressed. Wish more instructors taught like that. That evening, she was cleaning. Her rifle on the gravel near the range when Rains appeared again. Quiet as always, standing with his hands in his jacket. You came out swinging, he said. I didn't come to lose. She replied, not looking up. He took a step closer. You've got your father's blood. That made her stop. Slowly she looked up. Her voice dropped. You knew him. I served with him. Rains said quietly. Helmand Province. He saved 6 of us during a bad op. Retired shortly after. Used to talk about his daughter a lot. Said she had steadier hands than he ever did. Emily blinked hard. He told me she'd outshoot him one day, Rains added. Her breath caught. She looked down at her rifle. I already did, she whispered. 4. The first time, Rain smiled. The next week changed everything. This wasn't normal training. It wasn't even special ops. It was something colder, sharper, built to strip everything that didn't belong. There were no marshes, no drill sergeants, just simulations designed to break habits and reveal truth. Live fire, unscripted problems, split-second decisions, fatigue. That turned good instincts into bad ones, unless you had something deeper to rely on. Emily didn't crack. She didn't out-talk anyone. She outlearned them. She noticed things others didn't. How Derek from Delta had a half-second flinch every time a round fired left of him. How Juno, the former combat medic, breathed in triple counts. When she panicked, how Mackie pulled his scope too close when he was tired, bruising his eye socket just slightly. She never said a word, but her own patterns shifted. She adjusted silently, efficiently. By day 4, the others stopped underestimating her. Mackie started nodding to her without saying anything. Derek asked if she wanted to train off clock. Even the instructors started watching her differently. Not as a student, as a variable. Rains, though, stayed quiet. Every night, he appeared. During the final drill, just watching, leaning on a railing, observing like he was waiting for something, like a moment hadn't arrived yet. But when Emily fired, he watched more closely than anyone. He saw it all. Her hesitation when the wind shifted from the south. Her breath timing when she exhaled too early, corrected by instinct. The way she centered herself before every decision, like her body knew what her brain hadn't caught yet. But he never approached again. Not yet. Then came the final simulation. Full scenario. Hostage rescue, urban terrain, live rounds, fog of war. 12 candidates split into 4 teams of 3. Emily was paired with Mackie and Tripp, a former Air Force JTAC, who moved like he had eyes in the sky, even without a drone feed. Emily wasn't a participant. She was an embedded observer, but the instructors knew. Her presence stabilized the team like a weighted rifle. Mackie took overwatch. Tripp handled signals. Emily moved silently through brush and gravel. She spotted a second-story window glare. A sniper, obstructed view, backlit, nearly impossible shot. She dropped prone without a word. Adjusted for light. Angle wind, saw a leaf shift beside her cheek. Fired once, glass exploded, kill confirmed. The rest of the op unfolded like clockwork. Juno found the hostage. Mackie covered the exit. Tripp marked targets, no alarms, no civilian casualties. Timer stopped. 11 minutes, 34 seconds, top score of the class. No celebration, no congratulations. Just the instructors standing quietly, whispering behind clipboards. The candidates lined up at dusk. Helmets off, eyes forward. Then Rain stepped forward. He didn't speak, didn't read from a sheet, didn't announce the top performer. He walked straight to Emily, and without a word. He removed his cap, squared his shoulders, and raised his hand in a slow, flawless salute. The kind you give to legends. The air froze. Emily's hands curled at her sides. She stood a little taller. For a second, she didn't move. Then slowly, she returned the salute, crisp, clean. Just like her father taught her, Rain stepped back, said only 3 words. "You're not done." Then he turned and walked away that night. A sealed envelope slid under her door. Inside, a plane ticket, a security badge, and a note with just 1 word. Welcome. No insignia, no name. Just why were the corridors suddenly quieter than the drill yard? 3 days had passed since the arm snapped. The sound still echoed through the halls of Fort Braddock like a ghostly siren. Not literally, but in the way people paused when Alina Torres walked by, in the way conversations died when she entered a room. Everyone had seen it. Everyone had heard about it. And those who hadn't, witnessed it in person, had now watched the replay grainy. Drone footage, helmet cams, blurry long-range angles. A colonel, hand raised. A captain, restraint. a crack that sounded louder than any gunshot. The silence now wasn't fear. It was recognition. And recognition was dangerous in a place like this. Alina sat alone in an administrative room in the medical wing. Her reassignment orders keeping her off the line pending formal review. It was the Army's way of pressing pause on a scandal. Too big to ignore, but not yet ready to confront. Her uniform was crisp, her boots laced, but her duty roster was empty. She had become a ghost in her own house, except ghosts didn't get salutes. Not like this. Not like the quiet nod from the new recruits in the corridor. Not like the medics who stopped to mutter, "Ma Nam," with more respect than protocol required. Something was shifting, not just in the chain of command, in the culture. She hadn't meant to become a symbol, but the story was already writing itself. She had stopped a man once called untouchable, and now the base couldn't pretend not to see the truth. At first, it was whispers. Then came the statements. Signed, anonymous, some typed, some scribbled in shaking handwriting. Reports from enlisted soldiers and junior officers describing years of misconduct. Some talked about inappropriate comments, others about threats, sabotage careers, forced reassignments, coerced silence. One woman retired now wrote that Briggs had told her, "Nobody listens to girls who cry in the Army." Another described how she transferred out after a single closed-door meeting with him. Now, all those doors were wide open. Memos arrived from Army legal divisions, Pentagon liaisons called base. Command, General Marlene Huxley, 40-year veteran, a woman who declawed her way through 2 wars and 1,000 bureaucratic knife fights, summoned Alina to a closed-door session. Huxley didn't offer a smile, just a seat. You've caused quite a disruption. Captain, Alina said nothing. She couldn't tell yet if it was an accusation or a compliment. Huxley tapped a folder. The footage is clear. The testimonies are damning for Colonel Briggs. But you broke protocol. Technically, physically responding to a superior is grounds for court-martial. Alina nodded once. Technically, Huxley continued. Self-defense in the military I send to like civilian law. The standard is higher. You are expected to de-escalate. I did, Alina replied. If I hadn't stopped him, he would have hit me in front of 282 soldiers. And now, the general said, you have become the center of a conversation we can to contain. She stood, walked to the window, looked out at the field where it all happened. Captain, you should be prepared for more attention, possibly more responsibility. Alina's eyes didn't waver. I didn't ask for any of this. No, Huxley said softly, but sometimes leadership isn't about what you ask for. It's about what you refuse to accept. Back in her room, Alina stared at her bunk for a long time. Her hands itched with stillness. The waiting was the worst part. She was trained for chaos, for action, pressure, danger. But this limbo? It was like walking on thin ice, waiting for it to break under political weight. She could feel it in the walls, the tension, the power shifting underground. Staff Sergeant Reeves showed up around midnight with coffee and tired eyes. You not sleeping either? He asked. No, she said. I don't think this base sleeps anymore. He handed her the cup. There's talk. Real talk from D.C., even Capitol Hill. They want an inquiry. Into Briggs? Into the whole damn system. Alina sat down, elbows on her knees. He wasn't the only one. He was just the loudest. Reeves nodded. Yeah, and you were the first to say no loud enough for everyone to hear. By the end of the week, everything cracked wide open. Colonel Briggs' attorney issued a press statement, called Alina insubordinate, blamed woke culture, and claimed she de-staged the entire confrontation to further her career. The backlash online was instant. One headline on a military forum read, "She didn't stage anything. She survived it." Another read, "The snap heard round the base. Photos surfaced, grainy sketches of Alina from the barracks, drawings. Soldiers had passed around. One showed her standing still while a shadow loomed behind her. Another was simpler, just a pair of boots, unmoved in a sea of chaos. Reeves caught her reading them on a printed page. "You re-becoming a damn folk hero," he said. "I didn't want that," she replied. "Doesn't matter." He said, "Symbols aren't made by the person. They remade by the people who need one." The next morning, the Army sent in Brigadier General Curtis Ladden, Internal Security, known for handling scandals before they made headlines. He didn't shake hands. He didn't smile. He just walked into the command center, summoned General Huxley, and laid down his verdict. Reassign her quietly. Contain this. No press, no scandal. But Huxley didn't move fast enough because by then, the story had already left the base. Anonymous officers leaked details. Former female soldiers came forward in interviews. A retired general on Live TV said, "We ask soldiers to protect the nation. We should start by protecting each other." Alina watched it from her temporary quarters. She didn't feel pride, just pressure, because now her name didn't belong to her anymore. It belonged to 1,000 people who had finally found their voice. And she wasn't sure she'd ever get it back. That evening, she was summoned again. This time, both General Huxley and General Layden waited. Layden didn't sit. "Captain," he said, "we retransferring you. Westfield Command Center. Officially, it's a rotation. Unofficially, it gets you out of the line of fire." Alina raised an eyebrow. "Promotion?" "If that's what we need to call it. Containment," she said. Ladden didn't deny it. That's not punishment. "No," she said. "It's insulation." He stepped forward. "Captain, you're not the only one we have to think about." She locked eyes with him. "Then maybe you should." Veth thought about that before letting Briggs run this place like a kingdom. Huxley stepped in. "The decision is made. Paperwork is already filed." Alina didn't fight it. She didn't have to, because she knew what they hadn't figured out yet. You can relocate a soldier. You can relocate a reckoning. She packed in silence. That night, one duffel, boots first. Her old tactical notebook slid between folded fatigues. At the last moment, someone knocked gently on her door. Private Morrill, barely 20, nervous, eyes wide. "Ma, she said, standing straight. "I just wanted to thank you." Alina tilted her head. "For what?" "For what you showed us." Morrill's eyes glistened. "Not that you fought back," she added quickly, "but that you didn't flinch." Alina's voice was barely above. Why did Westfield feel like a battlefield in a suit? Captain Alina Torres stepped off the transport at Westfield Command Center just after 0600. The Virginia fog clung to the ground like breath on glass, giving the concrete base an eerie quiet. From above, the facility looked like a data fortress, square buildings, satellite arrays, and rows of solar glass. But inside, it pulsed with voices, emails, alerts. A war fought not with rifles, but with policy. Decisions, oversight. This wasn't exile. It was another front line. She was met by a lieutenant with a neutral face and a clipboard. "Captain Torres, welcome. You've been assigned to Strategic Operations Liaison Division. Major Daniels will brief you at 0900. Your quarters are in Wing D, second level. I'll have a key card shortly. No mention of Fort Braddock. No mention of Briggs, but the unspoken weight in the air made it clear. They all knew. As she walked the corridors, people glanced at her badge, at her face, at the name sewn into her uniform. Some said nothing. A few nodded. One soldier muttered softly under his breath as she passed, "Glad you here." She didn't. Slow. Didn't answer. She was still trying to figure out if this was a new opportunity or just a quieter kind of containment. But within 48 hours, it became clear. This wasn't Tia Cage. It was a match, and someone had just handed her fire. Major Layla Daniels wasn't what Alina expected. She was younger than most in command, with the posture of a boxer and eyes like sonar always scanning. Her office was spare, but not cold. Reports were stacked like fortifications. A corkboard behind her desk held pins, strings, and base names like a battlefield map. Skip the pleasantries, Daniel said. You not here to be quiet. You here because someone upstairs finally figured out that silence costs more than truth. She slid a file across the table. Unofficial task force, internal climate review. We restarting with 6 bases that shown patterns, sudden transfers, spiked complaint suppression, unusually high reassignment rates for female officers. Alina opened the folder, the first base listed. Fort Braddock. 2 others she recognized from earlier in her career. Places where she had learned to keep her mouth shut. Not this time. I'll do it, she said. Daniels nodded. Good. You read not just a symbol, Torres. You read the blueprint. Meanwhile, the storm around Colonel Briggs was only growing. More former service members stepped forward. Men who been threatened. Women who been harassed, one chaplain admitted he been pushed into early retirement after filing a report on behalf of a young NCO. Another described how Briggs cornered her in a motor pool at dusk and told her, "No one will believe you." Now, they believed. News outlets picked up leaked testimonies. Heavily redacted Army memos made their way into reporters' hands. Social media ignited again. Headlines read, "Toxic command culture under fire. Captain Torres sparks military reckoning." They told her to stay silent. She didn't. Alina didn't. To read the comments, didn't. To scroll through the storm. She spent her days in data, testimony, and tactical planning. 16-hour shifts, 1 cup of black coffee at a time. She met with Daniels, parsed complaint trends, drafted escalation protocols. They proposed new internal ways to bypass local command when those at the top were the problem. For the first time, change wasn't just whispered. It was on paper. It was on record. It had weight. Still, some nights, she couldn't to sleep. The hum of the command center faded, but her memories didn't. She lay awake, boots at the foot of her bed, wondering, what if I hadn't stepped forward? What if I just absorbed it, like every time before? Then she hear Private Morrow's voice again, steady, hopeful we will, and she remember her mother's words, spoken softly the night before Alina left for basic. Don't to let anyone take your name, not even behind a uniform. 10 days into her reassignment, she received a letter, red seal, official Army stationery. You are hereby requested to testify before the Article 32 hearing in Washington, D.C., regarding the events at Fort Braddock under the command of Colonel Martin Briggs. Her fingers didn't tremble. Her breath didn't hitch. She folded the letter, slid it into her chest pocket. When she looked up, Major Daniels was standing in the doorway. You ready for what comes next? Daniels asked. I was ready, Alina said. The moment I stood up to him, word of her testimony broke before she even boarded the transport. Social media exploded again. Captain Torres to testify. The reckoning continues. Will military justice hold? The snap was just the beginning, but inside her, there was no spotlight, no celebration, only purpose. This wasn't about punishment. It was about the truth, because the Army couldn't fix what it refused to face, and it was about to face itself under oath. The courtroom at Fort Myer was nothing like a battlefield, but somehow it felt more dangerous. Polished wood, armed guards, generals in dress blues, reporters sketching every breath, lawyers sharpening questions like knives. Colonel Briggs sat at the defense table, still in his bandage, pride wrapped tighter than his cast. His ribbons glinted. His mouth was drawn in a permanent sneer. But the power that once bent the base around him, Gone. He didn't to command the air anymore. Not in this room. Alina walked in. Posture perfect, uniform crisp. The hush was instant. She wasn't Tia Captain today. She was a reckoning in boots. The prosecutor called her to the stand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? She didn't hesitate. So help me God, she said. And then she spoke. She told him everything. Not just about the slap that never landed, but about the years leading up to it. The abuse, the whispers, the manipulation, the systems designed, not to protect, but to protect power. She didn't to raise her voice. She didn't accuse. She told the truth, one word at a time. Colonel Briggs didn't just abuse his power. She said, he modeled it, enforced it, taught it, and anyone who challenged it became a target. She paused. I snapped his arm because I feared what might come next, not just for me, but for the 282 soldiers watching. I did what I was trained to do. I neutralized the threat. Her voice didn't crack, but the room did. Something shifted. Even the judge leaned forward. Even the guards stood taller. The defense tried to push back, called her unstable, claimed it was insubordination masked as valor, but no one leaned in when he spoke. They leaned away, because the story wasn't his to tell anymore. Over the next week, 4 more officers testified. Each story added to the fire. Each one built the same pattern, a man in power, a system in silence. Until someone said no, until someone didn't move when the panel deliberated. They returned in under 4 hours. The verdict was unanimous. Colonel Martin Briggs guilty. Conduct unbecoming of an officer. Abuse of authority. Violation of the uniform. Code of military justice, stripped of command. Demoted, dishonorably discharged. And referred to federal court. Alina didn't to cry, didn't to cheer. She just breathed for the first time in months. And when she returned to Fort Braddock the next week, not in disgrace, but as a guest, she was met by General Huxley at the gate. You were right, Huxley said simply. About what? About what happens when one soldier stands up, others follow. She was escorted to the field where nearly 300 soldiers stood in formation. Not for punishment, not for inspection, for recognition. General Huxley read the citation aloud. 4. Extraordinary moral courage, physical discipline, and unwavering service to the principles of justice, equality, and honor. She pinned a silver oak leaf cluster to Alina's chest. Major Torres. Applause broke out like thunder. Morrow wiped a tear. From the 3rd row, Reeves saluted her, grin wide. Why were so many strangers suddenly calling her name? Major Alina Torres sat in a quiet Westfield operations room, watching another round of encrypted messages flood the task force server. Her name was in half of them, not as a sender, not even as a subject, just a whisper in digital ink. Captain Torres started something. She didn't flinch. Asked Torres what they did at Braddock. She leaned back, fingers off the keyboard. She hadn't spoken to a reporter. She hadn't issued a single public statement. But somehow, her silence had become the loudest voice in the building. And it wasn't just Westfield anymore. Bases across the country, Fort Hood, Fort Drum, Pendleton were reporting new internal reviews. Soldiers were stepping forward. Some used the new protocols she and Major Daniels had designed. Anonymous escalation routes. Direct to task force pipelines bypassing local command entirely. Others sent letters. One handwritten envelope from Camp Liberty had 3 words inside. You showed us. Alina held that letter for a long time. It didn't matter who sent it. It mattered that someone had. At the end of the 2nd week, her task force briefed the Army Inspector General directly. Daniels led the presentation. Alina stood at her side. Their data showed over 90 complaint suppressions. In 18 months, across 6 installations, patterns emerged like bruises in sunlight power, used not to protect soldiers, but to protect those in charge, and now that data was speaking for itself. Daniels closed the file. We not just documenting rot, she said. We prescribing a cure. The IG nodded, and for the first time in her career, Alina saw something she hadn't expected in that room. Not fear, not deflection, but readiness. General spoke up quietly. My daughter, as a second lieutenant, he said. She used to think no one would believe her. I think maybe she will now. That moment wasn't victory. It was momentum, and it was real outside. Under a thin line of sky beyond the office tower, Alina walked alone near the comms tower. It was cold. Fog curled along the path like breath held too long. She hadn't been to a drill yard in weeks, hadn't touched her rifle, hadn't led a formation, and yet she had never felt more engaged in the mission. It unsettled her sometimes, because action had always been physical, tangible, boots in dirt, orders shouted over rotor blades. Now, the war was paper, policy, whispered resistance, but she was still in it. Still needed, and still burning. Colonel Briggs, meanwhile, was unraveling. 1 week after his conviction, media outlets obtained sealed records through legal pressure. Over 30 internal complaints, some erased, some redirected, some met with silent reassignments and early retirements. 3 of the complainants had left the military entirely. 2 had developed PTSD from prolonged harassment. Confirmed by VA physicians, a former sergeant major retired, now living in Kansas, went on record to say, I saw what he did, and I didn't stop him. I thought protecting the chain was more important, but the chain was already broken. Public reaction was swift. A retired 4-star general issued a blistering op-ed. We teach honor, but we allow cruelty. That contradiction will undo us faster than any enemy bullet. The Army, upper echelons, previously silent, now began to pivot. Not because they wanted to, but because they had to. Alina knew that difference. She learned to see it in eyes, in posture, in how fast people walked past her without speaking. She knew who stood with her and who stood back, and both mattered. Because now, they weren't just cleaning up a base. They were changing what leadership meant. At Westfield, Major Daniels handed her a new folder. 10 more bases, she said. Alina raised an eyebrow. 10? The Army's approved expansion of the task force. Temporarily, internal only. They were not calling it reform yet, but that's what it is. She flipped the file open. One of the names stopped her cold. Fort Durand, the base where Alina had done her first officer tour, where she'd been told to tone it down when she tried to report a superior's behavior. She still remembered the quiet walk back to her quarters that night, the way the door clicked shut, the way her hand shook, the way she hadn't said anything again. For months, now that base was on her list. I'll take it, she said. Daniels looked at her. Sure. No, Alina said. But that's not the point. Media frenzy continued to build. Despite no interviews from Alina, commentators debated her silence like it was strategy. She hasn't said a word to the press, one pundit said on national news. And still, she's dismantling an empire of abuse. Another veteran, speaking on a panel, said, You want to talk about courage? Look at her. She snapped one arm, but she snapped a whole system open with it. Still, Alina stayed off camera because this wasn't about celebrity. It was about credibility, and that was earned, not broadcast. Then came the call. Senator Yvonne Keller, a former Marine and chair of the Military Oversight Committee, requested a private meeting. Alina wasn't given a choice. She was flown to D.C. in civilian clothes, escorted through a back entrance. No reporters, no flags, just 4 senators in a room. Tired eyes, tired hands, and not enough answers. Keller didn't smile, didn't to shake hands. She just asked, what would stop this from happening? Alina answered plainly. Accountability, real time, without fear of reprisal. Leadership isn't about chain of command. It's about who you protect when no one is looking. Silence followed. Then Keller spoke. We redrafting new oversight legislation. Your task force will be referenced anonymously. If you prefer. Alina didn't to nod. Didn't to thank her. She just said, make it count. That night, back in her quarters, she couldn't to sleep again. Not because of regret, but because she understood. Now, symbols done to rest, movements done to pause, and the people watching her weren't looking for a hero. They were looking for proof. Proof that someone could break the silence and still stand. Proof that justice could echo louder than fear. Proof that strength wasn't a raised voice or a slammed fist. It was what doesn't move in the early hours. Someone slid another envelope under her door. Inside, no message, just a drawing. A torch being passed from one hand to another. Why did her name suddenly feel heavier than her rank? Major Alina Torres sat alone in the Westfield Observatory conference room. A faint red glow washing over the glass walls as dusk settled across the Virginia hills. Outside, the command center remained awake, radios humming, servers blinking. Duty officers pacing with folders tucked under arms. Inside, she was still. She didn't to move. Not because she was resting, but because she knew the weight she carried now could not be shaken off. Not like sweat, not like exhaustion, not even like fear. She had become more than a soldier. More than the woman who snapped the colonel's arm. She was a name now. A headline. A rallying cry. And some people wanted her silenced for it. It started with a file. A black envelope slid across her desk by Major Daniels. Read it in private. Daniels said, her voice quiet but clipped. Inside were transcripts, forum screenshots, encrypted messages intercepted from a closed internal group, a chat thread shared among high-ranking officers. Some retired, some still in uniform. The thread was titled, The Torres Problem. Alina read every word, not out of curiosity, out of necessity. Some messages dismissed her as a media stunt. Others questioned her loyalty, her mental state, her motives. One chilling message from a colonel in Florida simply said, people like her are why command is collapsing. Daniel sat across from her, jaw clenched. Most of these are from officers we flagged the last quarter, same ones whose bases had suppression spikes. They re-feeling the ground shift. Alina stared at the page. So they re-pushing back. They scared, Daniel said. But scared men with rank are still dangerous. Alina closed the folder. She wasn't surprised. She was disappointed, because she had hoped, maybe foolishly, that the worst was behind her. That Briggs had been the end, not the beginning. She was wrong, because symbols dawn. End. They multiply, and sometimes they make enemies simply by existing. The following week, a rumor surfaced. Anonymous sources began telling reporters that Alina had once falsified records on a deployment in Afghanistan. The claim was thin, easily disproven. Still, it caught fire, a shadow of doubt planted in headlines. Hero or hazard? Sources questioned Torres, past. Major under fire. Did Alina Torres bend the rules before? She didn't respond, didn't issue statements, didn't defend herself online, because the truth didn't require volume. It just required clarity. Daniels took care of the facts, official logs, confirmed timelines, corroborating statements. Within 72 hours, the smear collapsed, but the damage? That was different. For 3 days, Alina saw the hesitation in the hallways again, felt the breath held just a little tighter when she passed by. Not suspicion, not even distrust, just fatigue. People were tired of picking sides, and that more than anything was what scared her. That night, she walked out to the perimeter fence. Beyond it, mist clung to the trees like veils. She remembered standing on the edge of a convoy road in Helmand Province once, night vision goggles fogged, waiting for an IED team that never showed. The air had felt the same tense, unfinished, quiet in the worst way. She closed her eyes, breathed deep. She wasn't T under fire anymore, but the war hadn't T ended. It had just changed to rain. Then came the hearing invitation. Not a courtroom this time, a Senate panel. Military accountability reform legislation was on the table, and they wanted Alina Torres to speak publicly, on record, under oath. She read the request 5 times, then placed it on her desk without a word. Daniels leaned in the doorway. "You know you don't. You have to," she said. "I know," Alina said. Daniels hesitated. "It's not like Braddock. This is political. They'll spin everything. You'll be edited, paraded." "I know," she repeated. Daniels studied her. "Then why go?" Alina's voice was calm. "Because silence doesn't to protect anyone anymore. It never did." The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning on Capitol Hill. Cameras were allowed. The room was packed. Uniforms, reporters, lawmakers, veterans, and more. A few familiar faces. General Huxley sat in the 3rd row, flanked by senior command. Private Maul, now promoted, watched from the public seating section, eyes wide, posture tight. Even Staff Sergeant Reeves had flown in, dress blues pressed. He didn't speak. He just gave her one short nod before she walked to the microphone. And the room went still. Alina didn't read a statement, didn't hold notes. She just spoke, measured, direct. "This isn't about one broken arm," she began. "This is about a chain of silence that has outlived its purpose." She outlined what her task force had uncovered: suppressed complaints, manipulated transfers, retaliation tactics masked as discipline. She described how Fort Braddock operated like a fiefdom, how she had been warned, how she had been threatened, how she had refused to flinch. "I didn't act out of heroism," she said. "I acted because the line had been crossed and nobody else would draw it again." One senator tried to push back, suggested her actions had inspired disorder. She didn't react emotionally. She simply said, "Justice isn't disorder. It's correction. And correction always feels disruptive to those who benefited from imbalance." The room shifted. Applause was not allowed, but it didn't matter. Everyone felt the temperature change. Afterward, as she stepped into the hallway, a young Marine approached her quietly. I filed my first report last week." Alina paused. "Good. I didn't think I could," the Marine said. "Then I read what you did." Alina nodded. "Not as a symbol, not even as a superior, just as someone who understood. Hold the line," she said, and he did. He stood straighter as she passed. That night, she returned to her quarters at Westfield. She was exhausted, mentally, physically, spiritually. She sat on the floor instead of her bunk, back against the wall, uniform half-buttoned. The lights were off, but the burden wasn't gone. Still, it felt lighter, because she knew something now. Symbols don't have to shout. They just have to stand, and sometimes that's enough to change the course of a system. Why did the reforms feel more fragile than the silence before them? 3 months after the hearing on Capitol Hill, Major Alina Torres stood in the same boots, in the same uniform, but the battlefield had shifted again. Westfield Command Center buzzed louder than ever. News clips called it the Torres Doctrine. Podcasts ran titles like "The Woman Who Made the Army Blink." She hadn't approved any of it. She wasn't interested in doctrine. She was interested in results. And that's why she was angry, because the results weren't coming fast enough, because some of them weren't coming at all. Across the polished floors of Building 3, the task force sat inside a soundproof room with whiteboards lined with red marked delays, every proposed change, every new complaint routing system, every anonymous report channel, every third-party oversight clause had hit a wall. One memo stamped from Army Legal read, "Implementation currently delayed for further review." Priority: Low after all of it, the hearings, the testimonies, the fracture of command silence, all of it. Delayed, Alina's fingers curled tight on the edge of the desk. It wasn't failure. It was sabotage, but not loud sabotage, not enemies throwing grenades. This was quieter, more suffocating, like a room slowly filling with smoke and the matches were being struck by men in starched collars behind doors she wasn't allowed to open. Major Daniels tossed another folder onto the desk. 2nd Battalion at Fort Harris complaints filed, 6 this quarter. All reassigned within 2 weeks. Guess what? The commanding officer said? Alina didn't answer. Daniels said it for her. We encourage internal resolution. Alina closed her eyes, which means silence them and move them. Daniels leaned back. They, reprotecting the culture. Still, then we push harder, Alina said. Even if they push back. Alina looked up. That was always part of it. The next morning, her name was in a memo from the Chief of Staff. Recommendation: reassign Major Torres to advisory status, temporary leave, rotation out of active climate reform operations. It wasn't phrased as punishment. It was dressed as strategic repositioning. But the message was clear. She was becoming inconvenient. Daniels met her in the parking structure before she saw the official order. They, reboxing you out, she said. Alina stared at the concrete. They retrying. Daniels exhaled. You gonna fight it? No, Alina said quietly. I am going to lead anyway. Daniels blinked. How? From wherever they try to hide me. That afternoon, Alina voluntarily stepped down from her task force lead. Not because she was backing away, because she had a different idea. She asked to be reassigned, not to D.C., not to Westfield, but to Fort Durand, the place where she'd once been silenced. Where her first report had disappeared, the request was met with confusion, then resistance, then begrudging approval. They thought they were removing her from visibility. They didn't. T realized she was about to stand exactly where the fight still burned. Brightest, Fort Durand hadn't changed much. The same dry wind, the same rattling fence gates. But the air felt different the moment she stepped off the chopper. Eyes followed her, not with dismissal, not with awe, with expectation. The base commander, a gray-templed colonel who had clearly read every headline, greeted her stiffly. Major Torres, you re-hear us. Command culture consultant? She nodded. That's correct. He looked like he de-swallowed a nail. We've had no reported issues. I know, she said. That's what concerns me. Within her first week, the base inbox received 9. New complaints, anonymous, some minor barracks comments, harassment disguised as banter. Others weren't. T1 detailed a female NC, being told she'd be better used in public relations after requesting a promotion board. Another said a young private was transferred after refusing off-base drinks with a senior officer. When Alina reviewed that one, she stopped reading halfway through. It was almost word for word what had happened to her 10 years ago. Same language, same. Silence, same base. History hadn't changed. It had just waited. She called a private meeting. All female enlisted soldiers on base. No uniforms required. Closed doors. No command presence. 32 showed up. They didn't speak at first. Just sat until one asked softly, Are we safe here? Alina looked around the room. You, safe with me. And the dam broke. Stories spilled like water held too long behind too many walls. Eyes welled. Jaws clenched. One staff sergeant, 20 years in uniform, spoke the words that cut deepest. I thought I'd outlasted. Turns out, it just learned how to blend. Alina stood quietly at the front. I am not here to fix everything in a week, she said. I am here to light the fires you've been carrying alone. They didn't teach you. They didn't cry. They just stood. That told her everything she needed to know. Word spread quickly within a month. The reporting rate tripled. 2 investigations were launched. A captain resigned. And Fort Durand, once a shadowed posting, was now under review by the same oversight team that Alina had helped build at Westfield. A senator visited quietly. A new chaplain was flown in, but more than any of that, the silence cracked. Conversations happened out loud, and nobody dared call it gossip anymore, because what had been dismissed as rumors now had names. And one of those names still walked the halls every day, head up, eyes forward, unapologetic, late. One evening, Alina returned to her quarters to find a letter slid under her door. Inside, a copy of an old incident report, the one she had filed 10 years ago, the one that disappeared. Attached was a post-it, 4 words. It was never lost. No signature, no stamp. Just quiet proof. Why did her silence speak louder now than anything she'd ever said? They called it a routine inspection, but it was anything but. 3 4-star generals stood on the parade field at Fort Durand, backs straight, polished insignias reflecting the sun. Behind them stood a group of senators, journalists, and quiet observers from every corner of the Defense Department. A review of reforms was underway, a test of a base that had once been forgotten. And in the center of it all, she stood Major Alina Torres. No podium, no speech, just presence. 3 years had passed since the moment her hand had stopped a colonel's strike. 3 years since the crack of his arm reverberated through a forgotten base and rippled across the country like a suppressed scream finally exhaled. But today wasn't about that moment. It was about what came after across the army. Reform had once been a word buried in paperwork. Now it was policy. 34 bases had implemented anonymous complaint routing. Oversight committees were now independent, not command-appointed. Promotions had been unblocked. Transfers were investigated, not rubber-stamped. More importantly, people spoke, not always loudly, but they spoke, and they were heard. The Torres Doctrine, as reporters still insisted on calling it, wasn't just a series of protocols. It was a cultural reckoning, an unlearning, and in its wake, the Army was beginning to look itself in the mirror. Some days, it didn't like what it saw, but it kept looking. That was the difference. A young lieutenant approached Alina after the field. Review. You read the reason I didn't quit, she said softly. Alina nodded. No, I'm the reason you knew you could stay. The lieutenant's eyes shined. It was still your story that got me through. No, Alina said again, gentler this time. It was your own. You just saw a reflection. The lieutenant smiled. It wasn't adoration. It was recognition. One soldier to another, not of rank, but of weight. Later, during the after-action session, one of the senators leaned over to a general. We never expected her to last this long. The general shook his head. We underestimated her. No, came the quiet reply from General Huxley, seated behind them. You underestimated all of them. She was just the one who didn't flinch. That night, the sun dipped below the tree line in Fort Durand. The motor pool was quiet. The radio towers blinked soft warnings into a darkening sky. Alina stood alone on the old drill field. This was where it had started for her. Not Braddock. Here. The place where she had been told quietly, insidiously, that it was better to keep her head down. That promotions would come if she waited her turn. That some things just weren't worth the fight. She remembered her hands shaking the night she first tried to file a complaint. She remembered the voice on the other end telling her not to burn bridges. She remembered believing it, until she didn't. Now, she looked at the same field and saw new footprints, new formations, new soldiers who didn't carry shame and silence. They carried truth, not for war, but for one another. And truth, when protected, becomes something stronger than armor. It becomes tradition, the kind worth building, the kind worth defending, the kind that doesn't to vanish with a retirement order. 2 days later, her transfer request was approved, not to a bigger base, not to D.C. She requested to return to Fort Braddock. Not as an officer under review, not as a symbol of controversy, as commanding officer. There had been debate, a quiet vote. Some feared she would disrupt structure. But the structure had already collapsed. All she did was name it and rebuild. She returned in early spring. The old yard looked the same, but the people did not. There was no whispering, no shrinking, no tension. The fear was gone, and in its place, conviction. She met with every squad. Listened first, acted second. She didn't to give long speeches. She didn't to install portraits. She didn't to ask anyone to thank her. She just LED and leadership is louder than legacy. One evening, a package arrived at her quarters. No note, no return address. Inside, a thick, bound stack of testimonials, pages and pages, all from women and men across every branch. Anonymous, signed, stories, gratitude, admissions, forgiveness. One line stopped her. We thought strength meant staying silent. You showed us it means standing still when the world tells you to move. She closed the binder, set it beside her bunk, and sat down without a word, because sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts, and that's enough. Years later, no statue was built for her. No building bore her name, but every academy cadet studied her case. Every drill sergeant